Hey everyone, just want to do a quick video here, just to update you on a couple of things and open a little bit of a discussion about our discussion topic for this module. I've waited a little bit longer than normal to put our discussion topic up for this module because I wanted to talk about Ukraine and Russia and the war that they're having. And since we've already done both lessons now, I thought I'd go ahead and throw it up. I know we have spring break coming up and then the test is after that. So I wanted to put this up now so that you've had time to kind of study both of the realms or the regions involved, and you can kind of maybe discuss this with a little more detail, a little bit more knowledge going into it. So I had mentioned before that I would probably update the lecture videos on Ukraine and or Russia because it's been a little bit since I did those videos. I didn't do the whole lecture videos just because not a lot has changed really since I did those lecture videos. The war is still ongoing, as you all know if you watch the news at all. It's I don't want to say it's a stalemate right now, but it's really leveled off, and not the amount of fighting by any means. It's still very brutal fighting going on there in Ukraine. However, with regards to the territory taken and where the front lines are, it's stabilized for the most part. There are still gains being made by Ukraine. Russia is now losing ground. However, it's pretty slow. And I wanted to pull this page up in particular. I'm pretty sure I referenced this page in your lesson, and it's a BBC page, and it's ongoing in the fact that they continuously update the information and the maps on this page to kind of give you the more current situation as this conflict continues. Now, in our discussion, when I post this tonight, this is going to be pretty open-ended. And what I mean by that is I want to hear your opinions about these things. There is no right or wrong answer. I don't want to turn into any kind of an argument or anything. Heck, a lot of the young people I know today don't even keep up with this stuff too much anymore. My generation, if there was a war going on, we kept up with it every night and every day. And I mentioned in my lecture video for this lesson that this would have been the dominating news story every day if this was done back in 1980s, 90s, maybe even the early 2000s. A war of this magnitude, this is a big war. It's not just a small regional war. This is a big war, and it really has the potential to get bigger if one side or the other makes a big mistake that draws in other countries to start joining into this war. In your lesson plan, we talked about NATO and how the situation would be somewhat different if Ukraine were already a part of NATO, and we outlined some of the reasons why they weren't before this war started. They were on track to be, but internal politics, external politics, for various reasons, they didn't officially join NATO. And at this point right now, NATO is actually in discussions with each other, the member countries, about how we would bring Ukraine in if they decided to join at any point. It's kind of a sticky point right now because, as you know, if you did your homework or your lessons, and hint, you're going to see this on your test, once somebody is part of NATO, I think it's Article 5, that's just off the top of my head, I didn't look it up before I started this, says that if any one country in that alliance is attacked militarily, that all the others will come to their aid. In other words, if Ukraine were part of NATO before this and Russia attacked them, then we would be fighting right there with them against Russia. So, really, the topic has never come up within NATO. How would you bring in a country that's already in a pre-existing war? In other words, this war's already started. So if we were to let NATO join right now, which I don't think is a real possibility because of this situation, how would that work? Would we have to go fight for them right now? What would be the determining factors? I think probably the best probability in this is that after this war ends, that Ukraine will be fast-tracked to join NATO as soon as it's over. I think that's probably what's going to happen. if you all have been doing your homework and kind of checking out the stuff that I've asked you to, you know that both Finland and Sweden have joined NATO now. It's become official since I did those lecture videos. So this is actually working exactly the opposite of what Putin wanted. He wanted to weaken NATO. He wanted NATO not to be a factor anymore. He was using that as an excuse to invade Ukraine, and it's actually strengthened NATO. So it's done the opposite. And Finland especially had a fairly long border with Russia. So now he has a brand new NATO country that actually borders Russia. They have a long border with Russia. So that could be a tipping point at some point in the future if he decides he wants to do anything. Now, my personal opinion on this is that Putin is not going to push NATO anymore because, let's be honest, they can't even fight with Ukraine in this war. If NATO got involved, it would be over in short order for Russia if that happened, and if it stayed conventional. Now, the only reason that Putin does have any kind of leverage in any of this right now is because, of course, Russia has a lot of nuclear weapons, and he uses those to threaten the West with. And nobody wants to do a nuclear war, because if that happens, an all-out nuclear war, basically the world would end as we know it. So that's all he has, is the nuclear excuse. So with that said, I don't think he's crazy enough to do this, or maybe a little part of me thinks he is crazy enough to do it. However, I think that probably there are people internal to Russia in his circle. If that became a real possibility, they might decide to take matters into their own hands and do something with Putin, because they know as well as anybody, if they do that first, they will cease to exist in short order. So that's kind of my take on what's going on, a very simplified, short take. So what I wanted to show you on this website is it has a lot of maps. It kind of has some explanations going through this, and I'll put the link to this in this message that I'm getting ready to send anybody, so you'll have it in case you don't have it in your lesson plan. I'm pretty sure it's in there though. So these are some maps. I'm not going to look at these in detail, but these just kind of showing from June to September small areas that Ukraine has retaken from the Russians. I'm going to focus on the bigger scale maps. So this is a map. It's more recent, from September. And again, this is going to be your eastern and southern part of Ukraine and Crimea. Remember, Crimea is the peninsula that Russia invaded and took in 2014. So now they are claiming this as their homeland, even though they took it almost 10 years ago now. Zelensky for Ukraine has pretty much said the only way this war is going to end is if they get Crimea back, as well as all this territory that's been taken in this current invasion. So I think Crimea is going to end up being the real sticking point on how this war eventually does end. This just shows you some small areas that Ukraine has regained recently. And there has been some talk from the Western allies, from NATO, that they haven't been openly happy about how swiftly this surge has gone over the summer. So Ukraine had kind of predicted that they were going to do a surge, an invasion, a retaking of their territory back in the spring. They started that early summer. They have been successful, but it's been slow. Russia had a whole year to dig in and form their lines. And quite frankly, from some of the news that I've read, is that NATO, us, and our allies have trained Ukrainian soldiers a lot during that time. And frankly, the Ukrainian army has come back and said, you know what, the way you all fight a war is not working here. Your tactics, the way you operate, the way our air support is here in Ukraine. As the United States, the past 20 years, when we fight a war, we're used to having total air superiority to other countries. That is not the case in this war for Ukraine. So they're having to adjust their tactics, and they're having to relearn how to fight even after we train them, because our tactics are not working that well. So Here's a map around. If you've watched the news at all, you've heard of Bakhmut. This has been some of the nastiest fighting in the recent months in Ukraine. Ukraine has basically taken that back. Crimea, even though there's no land assaults on Crimea right now, you see here, Ukraine is using naval drones, sea drones, and they're attacking the Russian fleet all around here, and they're also having rocket attacks on some military bases inside Crimea. So they're setting the stage. They're getting ready for an eventual retaking of Crimea. Here's some of the dates on here. And I wanted to scroll down to a map, a series of maps here. So these 4 maps are kind of a nutshell of what's happened over the past, since the invasion started, about almost a year and a half now. So before the invasion, so here's a map of Ukraine before the invasion, okay? Russia had already taken Crimea in 2014, and the yellow was kind of a separatist area that Russian separatists, which are Ukrainian citizens, but their allegiance is to Russia, they controlled this area before the invasion. Now, when Russia invaded initially in 2022 in March, they rapidly took all the red areas here. You see over here, there's no red area except Crimea. Here they came through and rapidly took a lot of areas. I mean, within a couple of weeks. I mean, it was quick. Now, you fast forward to November. See, they were almost to Kyiv, the capital here. By November, Ukraine had beaten them back everywhere except in the south around Crimea and the far east where those separatists are. And today's map, relatively today's map within the past month or so, this is the current map. So it's a far cry. You see Ukraine is slowly gaining back territory. The only place that they have lost a little bit of territory since the initial invasion is right here around Mariupol. See that little white gap right there? They've taken that, and that's crucial because this is Russia over here to the east, and their supply lines go through here down to Crimea. So Ukraine right now is working on this area right here, essentially what was white up here down to Mariupol. If they take that back, they're going to cut off the lifelines to Crimea. Once that happens, it's going to be a waiting game and a hard time for Russian soldiers down in Crimea. So that's kind of where we are right now with the war, just in a nutshell. I just want to do a quick little video here to update you on where we are and on our discussion for this module, and we'll only have a couple weeks to get this done. So please comment. If you haven't been commented, I'd like for you to do so. Like I said, I don't grade this, but it's nice to have everybody's input, and I don't want any arguing or bickering or anything like that. But I'm just going to ask you straight up, what do you think about the Ukraine war and the United States' involvement in supplying arms and money to Ukraine? So far, we have supplied billions of dollars in funding, billions more in military equipment, and it's paying off because not one official U.S. military person has died in this war, and we are keeping Russia in check. Now, the odd thing about this is, and I'm just going to be blunt here about which side's doing which, you know, everything in today's world has to be political, right or left, blue or red, whatever. So historically, and many of you that are normal college-age kids, or young adults, I should say, you don't remember this, but throughout my lifetime, it was always the conservatives are all in on military, fighting wars, fighting Russia or the old Soviet Union. I mean, Ronald Reagan is kind of like the poster child for Republicans in today's Republican Party, and that's what he did. I mean, that was his thing. He cracked the Soviet Union. He did a good job at it. Ironically, in today's political climate, really just the last probably 6 or 7 years, the conservatives, just because the Democrats have started supporting Ukraine, all of a sudden they're against funding Ukraine in this war. They don't want to send any more money to Ukraine. You know, they complain about how much it's costing and all that. However, if you really know anything about how the U.S. spends money in the world, we supply that much or more money to other countries across the world, including Israel, on an annual basis, not just during a conflict, but all the time. So I'm just kind of telling you this background information, so it's not as easy as you just turning on the news and like, oh, there's my opinion. You got to kind of think about this a little bit for yourself. And what I told you at the very beginning of this class is that's what I want you to get out of my course. I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican or you're for Ukraine or against it. I don't care about any of that. What I want you to develop is the ability to look at information objectively and come to your own conclusions and not just go out there and seek information that fits your narrative that you already had before. So that's what I'm looking for in these discussions. Just have a normal, friendly discussion about what you think about that. Should the U.S. continue to support Ukraine? Should we let Russia have the parts of Ukraine they already have? If we do that, is that going to embolden Putin to go after Poland? It would probably be next, or Estonia, or Latvia, or a couple other countries in the region. Moldova is one right next to Ukraine that has a lot of Russian backing in it. So if we just let Putin have his way, what's next? That's the big question on the traditional conservatives' mind and the moderate Democrats' mind. Of course, when I'm talking politics, I need to mention the far right now, which is your MAGA Republicans. They're against helping Ukraine. Ironically, the far left, the real liberal Democrats, are also kind of against helping Ukraine because they're anti-war. So you've got kind of a strange bedfellow there, a strange circle happening where the extremes of both parties are kind of somewhat on the same side for different reasons, but kind of on the same side of what to do about supporting a war. So that's how complicated all this stuff is. So I just want you to think about that and just put your input into the discussion on the discussion I'm going to post tonight. And one more thing I want to mention before I get off here. Most everybody is doing an outstanding job this semester of getting your assignments done on time. You're doing a good job on the Google Earth exercises. I'm very happy with that. It makes my life easier when you do that because if you've seen, I'm not a professor that just marks something right or wrong and goes. I give everybody feedback on their answers. So I do that because I want you to better yourself. It takes me a lot of time to do that, but I'm going to do that anyway. That's why it takes me sometimes a little time to grade some of your assignments. And that's no excuse because I should get those done quicker, but my work life has been crazy lately. So keep up the good work. And again, if you're going to be late or you have an issue, let me know up front. I'm pretty lenient on homework assignments. If you get them done a little bit late, I don't really care about that. Tests and quizzes are a different story. Be sure that you let me know if one of those are going to be late. So thanks, and if you have any questions, as always, just let me know.